We're very, very happy to be in the lovely home of Ralph and Pat McSwain in the Aquadale, Cottonville community of Stanley County today. The date is October the 20th, 2020. And our purpose here today is to interview Ralph McSwain, who was I don't know if he'd like me to use the term beloved, but he was a very well-liked sheriff, retired sheriff of Stanley County. And my name is David Grigg, and it's my privilege to have the opportunity to interview Ralph today. Ralph, I'd like to talk to you first about your upbringing, about your family, and I guess you told me you were born in Stanley County, not far from where we are.
That's right.
And what about your family? Who were your parents and siblings?
My daddy was Charlie McSwain, and he married Fanny West.
And you had at least two brothers.
I had 6 brothers.
Wow.
There was 7 I was to start with. So my daddy and mom raised all of them. My daddy, I don't know what year it was, but I was about 6 or 7 years old. And he had a stroke and went to a veterans hospital. Of course, I don't know where it was, and I was too young to know anything about it anyway.
Now, did y'all live on a farm?
Yeah, we lived on a farm over here on a plank road, 2 miles east of Rocky River Springs.
Okay.
And my mama was raised 2 miles east of Rocky River Springs up on the Winfield Road.
What was the area like in those days?
I don't know how to.
Did you travel much or go anywhere, or did you pretty well stuck at home?
Was pretty well stuck at home.
Now, what kind of work did you do in the family? Did you work on the farm?
Yeah, I worked on the farm. Plowed a mule. Cultivating corn. Chopped cotton. Picked cotton in the fall of the year. We had a little bit of grain to build. Grain to thrash. Worked it. Back in them days, farmers got together and worked for each other. And back in those days, they'd bring the thrashing machine, and I would help thrash wheat.
How old would you have been then?
I was about 12, 14, probably about that.
Now, you've got a birthday coming up pretty soon, I think.
14th of December.
All right.
I was born 14th of December,
1930. So you were growing up during the Depression and the war years, World War II years.
Yeah.
Do you have any recollections of that or memories of that, how that was?
Well, I remember everything was rationed.
Right.
Of course, it didn't bother us. We didn't have a car anyway, but Mother liked sugar. We had a difficult time getting all the sugar we needed and would like to have had.
Now, your siblings were all brothers? You didn't have any sisters in your family?
No sisters. They died when I was young.
And I guess you all worked on the farm.
Yeah.
You mentioned Rocky River Springs. I've always been intrigued about Rocky River Springs because it was a resort, I don't know, I guess 100 or more years ago. Do you have any recollections of Rocky River Springs?
Very little, and I've heard talk about it. It was you're right, it was a resort. People come in from all around, everywhere, because springs, 6 or 7 springs. They had all the different.
When y'all went to town in those days, where was that? Was that Aquadale or Norwood or Albemarle or where?
Went to Albemarle
When you were going?
when we wasn't anywhere.
Now what about school? What school did you go to as a child?
I went to Aquadale School,
All right.
and all my brothers went off to war, and I was in the 9th grade, and I thought I needed to be at home, wanted to be at home with Mama, because all of her other boys are going off to war.
Right.
So I quit school there, and on up I got older, and I realized that I'd missed learning a lot. And I remember back, they had safety matches. They had advertisements on the inside their safety matches. I took that advertisement and communicated with the American School in Chicago and took courses from them. And later on,
Now is that how you finished high school?
yeah, but then after that, Stanley Tech had started, but they weren't doing a GED test. So I went to Salisbury, took the GED test, and got a diploma from them, a GED diploma. And then I got elected sheriff, and I thought I ought to try to do better. So I went to Pfeiffer, worked about 3 or 4 years, and got a.
Now my understanding is that you graduated with what they call magna cum laude from Pfeiffer. That's with highest honors.
No, it weren't.
How long did it take you to finish at Pfeiffer?
About 3 years, probably. Some cum laude is the highest, ain't it?
I don't know. Which did you have?
I just had first.
You had the top one,
No,
magna. I'd say any of them are good enough.
yeah, they thought they were.
Now, did you go to school full time?
No, I just done
Did on while you were sheriff?
at nights and weekends.
Other than college, did you ever have any training in law enforcement?
Well, I'll tell you the history of that. I joined the Army Reserve when I was about 18 or 20.
All right.
Active reserve. We went to meetings once a week. They had drills. That was a trucking company at that time. L.D. Kane.
He was the leader of it?
No, L.D. Kane was the leader of it. So it was a trucking company at that time. And L.D. Kane was the chief of police in Albemarle. And I don't know where he done it, but anyway, they changed it to military police company.
Okay.
and I got training through them. They had training you could take by school, so I took several courses from them.
Is that how you got interested in law enforcement?
I suppose so, but my daddy was a police officer
Okay.
security officer for Wisconsin Mill back in those days. The mill companies had guards for their own settlement,
Right.
and he was Wisconsin Mill, and his brother Harmon was on Eford Hill.
Okay.
That was Woodrow McSwain's daddy.
Well, how did you get into law enforcement yourself? Did you?
Well, Bob Fur got elected sheriff, and after about a year from that time, I decided I wanted to try to get in. And Paul Poplin was a jailer at that time, and Paul and him were good friends. And Paul told me to go up there and see Bob, and he said, I'll recommend you if you go see him. So I went to see him, and after a few weeks, he appointed me a deputy sheriff. So I'm indebted to Bob Fur and Hall Poplin.
About when was that?
Well, I got elected in '62, so it must have been like '61.
Okay. Well, that comes to my next question. Was how did you come to be elected? Because you were not but about, what, 32 years old?
Yeah, but it was, yeah.
And how come you got to be sheriff at such a young age? Who was the sheriff before you?
Sam Dry.
Okay.
Sam was appointed when Bob got a job with ATF.
Okay.
And the commissioners, me and Sam asked him to appoint us sheriff. So they asked Sam if he's going to run next time. He said, well, no, not to know of. But then after that, he decided he wanted to run. And I had to run against him in the primary.
I see.
Run against him and Ray Kerr.
Okay.
And so I got nominated and run for sheriff.
That was in 1962?
Yeah.
How long were you sheriff?
28 years. 7 of it was a deputy.
Right. How many deputies would the sheriff have had back when you first started?
Had a jailer and 2 road deputies.
Did you enjoy being sheriff?
Mostly, yes.
Were there any experiences that stand out in your memory about it?
The thing I remember the most is getting shot.
Well, I didn't know if I should ask you about that or not.
Well, I was going to answer a couple questions. I had decided to start with, I wasn't going to answer no questions about it, but I will.
All right.
I was shot chasing a home robbery for suspect. And Mike Lauder was a deputy at that time, and when I got the call, I called him and picked him up, and we went together. And
You had a confrontation?
Yeah. And Mike, he shot me, and then Mike shot him in the shoulder and shot him in the stomach. Of course, when he shot me in the stomach here and in the straddle.
Mm.
I stayed in the hospital for 3 weeks. Dr. Smith and Dr. Green was my doctors. I had seen Dr. Smith work in the emergency room before, and I told some people, I said, if I ever get shot or anything, I said, I want him to come and take care of me. So that's how I got up with that.
Ralph, I know that sheriff is a political job. You were a Democrat, but I don't know if, in my years in Stanley County, I don't know of anybody that ran for office that had more wide support than you did from Republicans and independents and Democrats too. What do you attribute that to? Did you make any special effort, or?
Well, I made a special effort to try to do right by people, and I had a reputation for treating everybody fairly. And that's what I tried to do. And apparently it worked out pretty good.
It did work out good. Did you ever wish that sheriff wasn't a political job?
I never did wish it. Several of the counties around had what they call county police, and it weren't political. That was Langston County and Gaston County, and they done away with that after I got elected and went to sheriff's conventions and found out that that weren't working. So I never did wish it was different.
What role did you have in bringing women and minorities into the sheriff's department?
Well, I had a minority man first from Oakburg.
Was that the first minority in the Stanley County Sheriff's Department?
Yeah. And I can't remember his name.
Ted Klutz.
What?
Ted Klutz.
Ted Klutz.
Yeah.
Okay.
William G. Klutz.
All right. Okay.
And Ruby Sullivan.
And the lady was Ruby Sullivan
Right.
from Langston County.
You also had some of your deputies or employees that went on in law enforcement that you encouraged.
Yeah.
What was that? Did you just encourage them to move to get more training, or what?
I didn't volunteer to let them go. They went on their own. But I was glad for them to do as well as they did, because Stanley County weren't paying much salary, and they could always make more money elsewhere. And that's one of the reasons they went.
Ralph, I always looked at the sheriff's job as more than just law enforcement, because you had law enforcement, then you had civil law responsibilities, and you also ran the jail.
That's
Looked to me like a sheriff was more like a CEO. You had more.
Well, he ought to be, but I didn't consider myself a CEO, because I went out on calls.
You went out on calls while you were sheriff, not
yeah.
just the deputies?
I made a special effort to tell the deputies if a felony happens, I want you to call me and let me know so I'll know what to do about it. So I went on that theory, and it worked out pretty good.
What changes have you seen in law enforcement?
Well, they've gone.
Everything gone technical?
Yeah, it was technical, but it passed me up, and I didn't ever take none of that. Those courses in,
Computer stuff?
yeah, I never did do that.
When did you cease to be sheriff?
1990, December 1990.
And you were sheriff, how long did you told me that, but I've
28 years.
28 years.
28 years, and then on top of that, 7 years as deputy.
Now you were on a state board for training and for law enforcement people, isn't that right?
Training standards camp.
Okay. What was that about, or what was that like?
Well, they were in charge of the
Training and standards for law enforcement people?
yes, and they give certificates after you've done so much training on your own and so much time in the job is in.
I understand, I know that you are a craftsman. You're also a general contractor, isn't that right?
Yeah,
And you built this house.
yeah.
How did you have a reputation for being a skilled craftsman. How did you get into that? Is that going back to your youth?
Before I got to be a deputy sheriff, I worked at carpenter work
Okay.
and done that for several years. And on top of that, my brother Evans and Brian, Evans, as I say, he went to World War II, and he got a job in Fort Knox. They'd give him a position of making training aids, and he worked in the shop. And when he came from the Army, he built him a cabinet shop. And I worked in the cabinet shop for several years, and then they started building houses, and I worked with them on building houses. And when I was 24 years old, I went to apply for a job at the sheriff's office.
And you built this house, and you built about all the wood furniture in this house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. As somebody who can't do anything, I'm amazed at that.
Makes me think of what my brother told me. One of my brothers told me, said, I hate to learn so much because when I die, it'd be a lot of waste.
Do you still do any woodworking now?
Not now.
What are you doing now to pass the time?
I work with word puzzles.
All right. Are you a sports fan?
Yeah, I love watching a lot of sports.
I'm sorry your Braves lost over the weekend,
I
so you
was
won't
too.
get to watch them
I
tonight.
was disappointed, but I'll pull for the Dodgers to beat them.
All right.
I noticed in the paper this morning, 2 men from Charlotte's going to be playing with them.
Ralph, do you have what are your thoughts about Stanley County? What kind of people are in Stanley County?
Well, they're good people. They were been good to me for all those years.
Do you have any advice to them?
No, I don't.
What about, let me ask you this, about law enforcement. I know there have been changes in that. Are you concerned about the safety of law enforcement officers these days? That's something that is in the news a lot and seems to be a concern. It's a concern to me. And were there people in as you were coming along that helped you? Or did you have anybody that especially stands out that you were thankful for?
Well, as I said before, Paul Poplin introduced me to Bob Furr, sheriff. Paul Poplin and Jack Lee and Kermit Young recommended me, and I appreciate that. And A.D. Poplin.
Okay. And so you were a deputy for 7 years before you were sheriff.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's amazing that you were elected at such a young age. We're sort of drawing to a close here. Is there anything that you'd like to add that I haven't asked you about? Anybody or any experiences?
No, I talked about the Army Reserve a little bit.
Yep.
And I was in it for 12 years.
Okay.
And then I decided to want to be sheriff, and I thought, well, I'd try and take on too much, and people may not appreciate it. So I got a discharge.
Okay. And you went to Fife for a while. You were a deputy sheriff?
While I was high sheriff.
Well, let me talk about high sheriff a minute. Where did that expression come from?
I think it come from England. I think they brought it over here from England.
Well, one of the things that's always intrigued me about law enforcement people, now you tell me if I'm right, always seemed to me that law enforcement people, whether they were deputy sheriffs or police officers or patrolmen or even SBI, they all, not all, but many of them always wanted to be the sheriff.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
Well, I just don't know. It might be that they thought they could better themselves as a sheriff, which they could if they do right by people.
You got any political thoughts these days, or you sort of got that behind you?
It's not exactly behind me.
Yeah.
I watch a lot of news on television.
Yeah.
Watch MSNBC.
Right. Anything else you'd like to add, or have we pretty well covered it?
Pretty well covered it, I think.
All right. I appreciate your talking to me today, and we appreciate Pat being here, and I certainly appreciate you taking this time for this interview.
And I thank you for taking your time.
Well, I'm honored to come down and glad to get to find you, and I'm honored to be able to do it. Thank you.